Happy Sunday, everybody. I feel like it's been over a month since I've preached, so to make up for lost time, we're going to have a short 3-hour homily. No, but it's very good to be preaching again. Before Mass, I was thinking to myself, I got some sun, I have a nice tan, and then I looked at Deacon John, and immediately I felt like an albino. Before we get into today's message, I just want to share a few things about some things that are going on. First, we have a number of kind of ongoing construction projects this summer. Mostly we're addressing things on the exterior of our buildings. But I want to call your attention to one project which will should begin, please God, within the next week. And that is work on the lower church at St. Bridget so that we can convert that space into a much-needed gathering space. And what this is going to allow us to do is to have hospitality after Mass, as well as providing meeting space for small groups and other activities, which is also really needed by our Brazilian community that meets there on Saturday nights. Since we're hoping that the work is going to begin this week, we are going to move Saturday adoration and confession, which is at 12:30, to Our Lady of Fatima, and that will start this Saturday. In the next week or so, registered parishioners will receive a letter inviting you to sign up for online giving. We ended our most recent fiscal year with a deficit, and we anticipate a shortfall for the coming year. Like many of you at the parish, we've had to tighten our belts, but with your investment in our parish family, we hope to avoid further cuts to ministry and staffing. Our vision is to become a growing community of faith where everybody feels at home, and your offertory gifts are a big part of making that happen. So thank you for your support. Finally, and this will segue into today's message, as some of you know, my grandmother recently died, Grandma Souza. She was 99 years old, and we had her funeral this past week. So on behalf of my family, I just wish to say thank you for your words of condolence and your prayers. For me, it was a real privilege to celebrate her funeral Mass, and doubly so because it brought together so many members of our family, some of whom I haven't seen in over a decade. Inevitably, people said things like, "It shouldn't take a funeral to get us all together." Maybe you've heard that in your own family. But with time, what happens is people do grow apart, and in some families, there might be some things in the past that have in fact pushed people apart. So if there's anyone in your family who you haven't spoken to in a while, I encourage you to reach out to them. I mean, maybe it doesn't need to be anything big. Maybe just find an old photo and say something like, "I came across this and it reminded me of you. I hope you're well." It's kind of funny. Actually, no, it's not funny. Sometimes people only remember that they have a grudge, but they don't actually remember what the grudge was all about. Nothing against the Irish, but I've heard this condition described as Irish amnesia. You forget everything but the grudges. I know a priest who once told me, "People think I take the easy way out by preaching about love all the time. But what they don't realize," he said, "is that love is hard. I have 9 brothers and sisters, and I still talk to all of them. Do you think that's easy?" Love is one of those things which is simple, but not easy. Love is one of those things which is simple, but not easy. It's simple because to love, all you have to do is to desire what is the best for the other. But it's not easy because that is not something that we always want to do. Why? Because it requires us to have thick skin and soft hearts. But often it's the opposite's the true, isn't it? We have thin skin and hard hearts. People can say or do things that we can misconstrue or take the wrong way. And people can even say and do things that they actually mean to hurt us. But in both cases, growing spiritually means that we have an open heart, even if it is a wounded open heart. Simple, but not easy. This brings us to the F word that many people don't want to hear: forgiveness. And forgiveness is supposed to be a lot like love, unconditional. But I should say, sometimes forgiveness is more an internal posture that refuses to hold on to past hurts more than it is something which is necessarily externally manifested. I mean, think about it. When was the last time that someone came up to you and said, I treated you wrong, I'm sorry? Or flip the script. When was the last time you said to somebody, I treated you wrong, I'm sorry? Probably not often. That's why I think that forgiveness is very much an internal posture that's needed. Like, this is what we need to extend to the person who cuts us off in traffic, the person who jumps ahead of us in line at the grocery store, the person who slights us at work, or the person who can't just simply find the wherewithal to speak those two simple but not easy words: I'm sorry. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying that someone should let themselves or others be continually victimized or abused, because in many instances, it is better to terminate a relationship than to let yourself or someone else be a punching bag. But even if a relationship has to end, that doesn't mean you can let your heart harden. Because as we pray in the Lord's Prayer each day, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And this is a big part of what Jesus is teaching us in today's gospel. In the gospel, there's the parable of a man who sowed good seed in his field, but an enemy came overnight and sowed weeds among the wheat. And as the crops grew, this became clear. The servants want to pull up the weeds, but the master says not to, because uprooting the weeds will kill the wheat also. Our lives are the fields that are sown with weeds and wheat. Our first reaction when we might encounter a weed might be to come down with an iron fist and to tear it out. But that's not what God does with us, is it? Rather, God is patient, and God, at least for a time, tolerates our faults and our foibles. The weed that's referenced in today's gospel is generally identified as being darnel, which is a weed that when it's young, it looks just like wheat. And then as darnel grows, its roots entwine with those of the wheat, so that eradication of the darnel kills, destroys the wheat too. Forgiveness is what keeps us from being so ruthless with others that we get harmed too. Let me say that again. Forgiveness keeps us from being so ruthless with others that we get harmed too. Because for us, sometimes it's better for us to endure an injustice, to bear a wrong patiently, than to risk hardening our hearts. It is better for us to bear a wrong patiently, to suffer an injustice, than to risk hardening our hearts. So a question that we might take to our prayer this week, or our recollection, is quite simple. Who do I need to soften my heart towards? Who do I need to soften my heart towards?